أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
Welcome everyone to RSR lecture. Are we up to 8 now? Lecture 8, and so which is continuing the steps of actualizing our divine intellectual soul, and we're up to Thikr today. So I'm hoping everyone right now is enjoying isolation. It's going to be a long time, and it's been a while already. So inshallah everyone's staying strong, staying positive, and enjoying now school since it started for the people that have school. May you all be muwafaqin in this year, inshallah. So as we said every single time, we will start by the recitation of Dua al-Faraj, so we can have the blessing and the presence, inshallah, of our Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. So we can all read it together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. So to get to today's lecture, today we're doing Thikr. So if you remember in the previous two lectures, we started the steps to actualizing our divine intellectual soul. The first one was the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the second one was the love of Ahlul Bayt, and today is Thikr. So just to start this off, the direct translation to what Thikr is may help us understand what Dhikr is. And in English it translates to remembrance, or to remember. But what does that actually entail, and how are we meant to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, what do we need to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the answer to that, quite simply, is Allah Himself. Because we can't do anything without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore we need His help to remember Him. Okay, that's a pretty basic sort of step. But in the Divine Intellectual Soul lecture, if you remember, we actually established where remembering comes from. And we said remembering comes not from the brain itself, it's not from this physical brain, but from the mind. We said the mind is not a physical thing. Okay, so in terms of understanding or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to understand one simple concept. And it's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not encompassed by space or time. So he's not in any defined space or in time at all. He's sort of like surpassed that. He's like beyond that. The question here is our mind also beyond this space time thing? And the answer to that is no, it's not. In fact, our mind can only exist in the present at the moment, or like it can only exist with the time factor. And so yeah, our mind is confined to space and time. Let's see, is that a problem or not when it comes to remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who isn't encompassed by space-time? So just a bit of a note on the mind. The mind can only be at one point of space-time at a particular instance. For example, when I ask you, let's say, to think about something, let's say I tell you, think about stars. You can't think about stars but also be thinking about like something you did 3 years ago. You just won't be able to do that. It's very difficult because your mind can only be at one point at one time, and so for it to efficiently work, it can only be at one point, and so you can't do this. So let's see if this is going to be a problem. But we've just, throughout this lecture, I've been saying space-time, space-time, space-time. Why am I saying space-time rather than space and time? Surely space and time are different things. Well, obviously they are. Why are we grouping them into space-time? And to understand this, we're going to show you something that someone has proposed, and his name was Minkowski, and he has a famous diagram that looks like this, and it's called Minkowski's diagram, and it's a really nice model that helps us understand what space and time are and their relationship. So what he said, so I'm first going to talk in terms of maths, and if you don't understand maths, don't worry about it. I'll explain it in a different way later, so it makes a bit more sense for if you don't understand this or you haven't taken this in maths yet. But in maths, we learn about things called axes, like the x-axis, the y-axis. So Minkowski says that space is two axes. It's like the z-axis and the x-axis. And then you have time, which is like the y-axis. And so they built sort of like a 3D plane. And so what happens is, in this plane, that's where we can exist, alright? That's the maths explanation. If you don't understand maths yet, let's think of space as like a 2D plane. Like, you know what 2D is? Like, it's flat. And then time is like the bit that comes out of the ground. So let's say space is like the ground, and time comes out of the ground. So that entire area that time and space make is what we're going to call space-time. Alright, so what this model shows is that there are so many different possibilities in the past and the future, and they all condense into one single point. And that point is the present. So the present is where both future and past meet. The question here is, why do future and past have so many possibilities that they branch out? Okay, maybe for future that makes sense, because we know that the future is not defined, and depending on our action, different things are going to happen, right? But what about the past? Why is the past also a cone? Because it's happened before. Surely it's also a straight line. And the answer to that is that's not necessarily the case. Let's think about it. What makes the past? It's not just your actions. Your past is made by your actions alone. But the past in general is made not only by my actions, but every single one of our actions. Every single action that happens on this earth defines the past. And so obviously, there are going to be so many different things that are happening that define the past. But as we come close, when we get to the present itself, that's going to be the moment. And so everyone's going to be in that moment together. If that makes sense to everyone so far. So that's why the past looks like a cone, because each of us are doing different things at the moment. We were doing different things 10 minutes ago, for example. And so all those will have consequences, but all those consequences will collide into what we call the present. Similarly with the future, once we get past the present, there are so many endless possibilities, not only for our actions, but the actions of others that may come into play and stuff like that, and that's why the future is also a cone. Now, if you see this line that's been drawn here, this like squiggly line, that's, let's say, one person. That's, for example, me. So that's my past, and that'll be my future. Whether that's my future or this doesn't matter. What we're trying to get at is you're only one thing in this bigger cone. Let's say maybe, so I might be this line. Maybe you aren't this line. You maybe start from here, because your action's here, but it will come to the middle, and then it'll go out somewhere else. And so that's just a bit more understanding of why we call it space-time, because they're things that are super related. And what's interesting is that all of both past and present, everything goes back to one point, and it's the present. And if you remember what we said the mind can only exist in one point of time. So what our mind can do, it always exists in the present, but what it can do, it can float around in the past or future. That's the cool thing about the mind. Although it exists in one point of space-time, it can only exist in one point, it can keep tracking down that line continuously because it's cool. But our physical body stays in the present. Okay, so that's just a bit about space-time, and this will be really important later on. So now let's move on from just space-time. Just a bit of a note before we move on. Another important thing is, since the present is the middle point, it can both impact, it determines both like what the future, determines future events, but also it defines how past events have an impact. So it's pretty much the link between them two and has an impact on both. Okay. So the mind can exist within the cone anywhere. The question here is, what is outside the cone? So we've shown this cone, and we said the mind can exist anywhere, can wander around in the cone wherever, sure. What is the outside of the cone? Does that even exist? Well, if we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not encompassed by space-time, so is not in the cone, so surely that means that the stuff that's outside the cone is something. And that something is the possibilities that can't happen to us. And what we mean by that is, for example, I know that, because since I'm human, I'll never one day just randomly grow wings and randomly fly. That doesn't happen. I'm a human being. And so that's a reality that's outside the cone. It doesn't exist in my future perspectives. But it does exist because it's a concept. And so therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is someone who's encompassed by this whole system, but he can see things that are happening in the cone and things that don't happen in the cone. So you can see both inside and outside the cone. And why that's important is it shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows all the possible outcomes and futures, even the ones that can't happen. So pretty much what I'm trying to get at here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. He knows the ghaib, things that haven't happened yet. But we, since we're in the present, can't see all those possible futures. We can only see a defined line, a defined route. And so that could be a limitation of us and something we might need to overcome to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just putting it out there. So that was the little disclaimer I wanted to make. So now let's move on to what parts of us are actually involved with our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with our love for Him. Is it the body? I'll move the pointer away. Is it the mind? Is it neither of those two? Is it both of them? The answer to this is yes, both of them are important. We need both the mind and the body in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how can we have both the mind and the body in the same place? We saw that the mind can wander wherever it wants, but the body stays in the present. What point do they both exist together? That point is the present. So it is that super important that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the present. At the moment, that sounds really weird. What does that actually mean? And why? What do we mean by our relationship has to be in the present? And why is it that it is really hard for us to grasp this concept? Well, the answer to this is what it means to have our relationship in the present. We'll actually get to that later on. All you need to know at the moment is that we actually find it quite difficult to live in the present. Think about it logically. We're always thinking about, back in the old days we used to do this and that, or I should have done that differently. So that's thinking of the past. Or alternatively, you think of the future. Oh, I have a sack in 2 weeks, I'm freaking out. Or what job do I want? Stuff. Always think about the past and the future. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our relationship with Him, we can't keep thinking of the past of what we have done, or the future of what we can do stuff later, or what we will do. We have to focus on the now, because only now can we make progress. And only now can we actually connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because both our body and our mind are here. And that's why that's what I sort of wanted to just get that concept in now before I explain it later. That's what it means to have a relationship in the present. But we do actually find it quite difficult, because we always think all the past or the present. But why is it that we find it difficult? And the answer to that is it's a problem with our brain. Sometimes if you just try staying calm for 1 second, if you've tried some of those meditation stuff or something like that, where they ask you just clear your mind and just live in the moment or something like that, we always find it really awkward and weird. Why that? We find it unnatural. And why that's the case is because our brain our mind isn't comprehending this. It's because what the mind thinks, it thinks that it needs to keep thinking for it to exist or be alive. So it wants to continually guarantee its own existence by thinking. To make this a bit easier to understand, it's like when if we're told to stop thinking at all and just to stay calm, it always feels unnatural and really weird. And sometimes we find it difficult. In fact, things will keep coming to our mind and stuff like that, and won't let us have this moment of calm. It's because our mind doesn't want to stop thinking, because it continuously is thinking these days. And so to stop thinking is as if it's disappearing. And it doesn't want that, because that's scary. It thinks it's dying. And therefore, that's why we continuously try to think, and we can't live in the present. And that's something we want to try overcoming, actually, because it becomes a limitation. So if you've heard of the Western philosopher. He called himself a philosopher anyway. His name was Rene Descartes. And this guy, he thought he made a revolutionary breakthrough in philosophy. He was like, I'm so good because I figured out that this notion that is, I think, therefore I am. And he thought it was like really breakthrough. And even today, people think that's like such a wow, such an amazing concept. If we think we exist. If you remember what we just said before, Descartes actually fell into the classic trap. The trap is an illusion that we create for ourselves. An illusion whereby we think that we need to continuously be thinking to actually exist. That's not true. We can't exist in the present without this mumbling thought. And so, what we do to satisfy ourselves, we actually occupy our mind with things that are happening in the future and the past. And that's probably our biggest problem. And if we can really see it in Salah, a lot of time when we pray, yeah, we see that our body's doing the actions, but is our mind actually focused on the Salah? Sometimes it is, but sometimes it wanders off. It wanders off to things in the past. For example, you go, oh, I really want to do that thing again, that was so fun. Or you go, hang on, should I have done that when I was talking to that person? Oh, and you start regretting things. Alternatively, you could be thinking of the future. Oh, next, after I finish Salah, I have to do this and that and this and that, and you make a checklist. What you've done here is your mind can't stay in the present moment doing ibadah. Your body is, your mind's wandering around. And that's what we mean by if our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't the present, it could be problematic. Because we will not be focused. But let's, just for the sake of analogy, let's assume that we can have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the past and the future. How will that look like and how will it work? And what's the problem with having a relationship like that? So let's look at the future first. So what if we could have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's only based in the future? Well, what would happen there is that we'd have a relationship that's sort of like procrastination. And if you don't know what procrastination means, it's the action of ruining your life for no apparent reason. Literally. It's pretty much saying that, oh, I'll do something later, I'll do something in the future, tomorrow. And you keep delaying it. We say that a lot of time when we revise for exams, we keep procrastinating. But that's how our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be. Since we're not living in the present, we'll be like, oh, I'll just like do dua for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tomorrow, Or I'll become Muslim tomorrow for people that are atheists or something like that. And you continue to delay until your time's up in this world, and then you don't actually achieve anything. We'll give an example of a trampoline. It's like you buy a new trampoline, yeah? And then you just don't use it, you just leave it there. For show, maybe. So just to show people, oh look, I'm so cool, I have a trampoline. But you never use it yourself. What's the point of that? It becomes so useless. That we can apply to our actions. Our actions, for example, Salah. Some people, let's say, don't pray like with full intention. They're always not focused in their Salah. But then when they only keep Salah for show, for example. So when they go to a masjid, they pray with so much like spirituality and everyone's like, wow, this guy's so cool and amazing. So what we're doing here is we're praying for show. We're not praying for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's how a relationship of future may look like. Why we actually gave the example of the trampoline specifically is that we think the trampoline really is a nice representation of our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and towards actualization. The base of the trampoline, so the legs of the trampoline, are like a sort of deen. They're like the virtues that Islam is built on, that our life is built on, that keep us strong and keep our faith strong. So that's super important. But the thing is, usul deen are like high up, and the trampoline, cause you see the legs, they're pretty tall, and so the trampoline is actually quite high. So usually we can't get onto the trampoline without having to break the legs, which would remove all the swords. That's totally bad, and then you can't actually jump on the trampoline. Or alternatively, we need something that helps us get onto the trampoline. And what we have are the wajibat, these actions that are based around usul ad-din that help us. They get us that first step. They get us to that level where we can start jumping. The hijab is like the barrier on the trampoline. It makes sure we don't fall off the trampoline. It's like a protection sort of thing. And then finally, the material, the actual base of the trampoline, that's the love of Allah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fear of the future. And so that's the plate that allows us to jump. So what is the jumping itself? The jumping is the mustahabat actions that we do, and dhikr. Why dhikr specifically, we'll get to later. But just note that the jumping is like the actions that we choose to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's turning all our actions into a'mal, or good deeds, by giving them the intention to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or whether it's prescribed things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Ahlul Bayt have recommended for us. So that's the jumping. The question here is, if we had a relationship in the future, what would happen is you'd say, oh, I'll jump later. And so you won't be jumping at the moment. And so you'll never be on that trampoline. You'll never take that first step of getting on the trampoline. And that's a problem. Before anyone gets confused, I did say the fear of the future is part of the base with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That may confuse you because we said that we can't have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the future. So why is one of the bases of us getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the fear of the future? And that concept can be understood. Sorry, that's the jumping. I missed that. That concept can be understood by explaining to you guys that there are actually two types of future. The future isn't one thing. There's that future of this dunya. That's like the one that's encompassed by that cone. Future in terms of time. And that's like your job in the future and your grades and whatnot. So that's things that are in this dunya. So in this world, in the future. But then there's also a future that's not encompassed by time. Because in the hereafter, there's no time. There's no space. So this future is the one that's not later in time, but rather later in sort of steps. So after this world comes the hereafter. That future is a future that we want to be thinking about. So when we say fear of future, we're not talking about this dunya future, we're talking about the akhirah future. Why is it important to have this fear of the future, or this remembrance, dhikr, that the hereafter exists? The answer to that is it acts in two ways. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually fear of the future or thinking about the future is so important that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually giving us a tool inside of us that makes us make sure we continuously look ahead and think of the future. And that's the fitrah. If you remember, we explained what the fitrah was in the Loving Allah lecture, the Divine Intellectual Soul lecture. The fitrah is this compass that guides us to Sirat al-Mustaqim. It gives us that goal in the future to look forward to. Sirat al-Mustaqim is getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before we move on to the next world. So the whole intention of the fitrah, or the whole goal of the fitrah, is something not of this world, it's of the next world. And so the fitrah is literally a compass that's telling us to keep thinking of the future. So it shows us that the fear of the future, or the remembrance of the future, is really important. And why it's the case is for two reasons, as I said before. The first is it motivates us. We won't move or try to work for something if we can't see our goal ahead of us. And so by seeing the future, we know that there's a goal that we want to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and actualize our souls. And so we are motivated to move there. The second thing is thinking about the hereafter makes us think about the reality of our actions, the consequence they have, and the effect they have on our hereafter form, which is really important to make sure we don't go off the track, to stay on Sirat al-Mustaqim. So that's why it's really important to have a fear of the future, or this sort of thinking of what's ahead, so that we can stay on Sirat al-Mustaqim and reach the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. So pretty much, that's us, and that's the hereafter. And all we have to do to get there is follow the Sirat al-Mustaqim, a straight path. But it's actually not that easy. Although the straight path in itself is straight, our journey on it may not be that easy. And why that's the case is because we have our greatest adversary, the shaitan. He's waiting there. He knows that that's going to be our path, so he's waiting on the road. He's waiting for us to come, and he's ready to trick us. And what he does is something really clever of the shaitan. He's quite evil. He knows how to get us well. And what he does is that he knows that we have this. Our fitrah gives us this drive to think of the future. And so now we're naturally, what we do this, is we have to think of the future, think of the hereafter, so we can know if what we're doing is right and wrong, etc., etc. So he knows that we have this whole thinking of the future. So what he does is he tricks us. He uses that same feeling and diverts it to something that's not right. So he goes, yes, there's that future, the future in the hereafter, but there's also a future in the dunya, And I want you to use that drive that you have, that motivation, to focus on that rather than the real hereafter. So he makes you lost. He takes you off the Sirat al-Mustaqim by making you think of the future in the dunya, which is the fake future. So he uses something we already have inside of us, this like sort of motivation to look at the future, look at the consequences of what we do, but makes it in the future, in the dunya, so that we don't think of the consequence of actions and then fall into wrong. So Imam Ali alayhi salam actually has a nice hadith about this. He says, "اعمل لدنياك كأنك تعيش أبدا واعمل لآخرتك كأنك تموت غدا." So do this for this life, as if you have forever in it. But then do it for the afterlife as if you die tomorrow. So he's saying, if someone tells you die tomorrow, you'll try doing so much today to make sure that before you die, like you do everything, right? And so what he's saying is we have to be really like stingy with our time, like our work towards the akhirah. We have to try doing as much as we can now, as if we were going to die tomorrow and we were going to go to the akhirah. And in terms of the worldly things, you have forever to do them. So just keep procrastinating those things. And don't procrastinate the really important stuff that impacts your hereafter. So that's what he's saying. And that really relates to this future thing. Let's not listen to the shaitan, focus on the worldly future. Let's keep looking at the future of the hereafter. So that all of this big talk was about what happens is if we have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the future. What if our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the past? Well, that could be problematic. Why that's the case is it's sort of by saying that our relationship with Allah was in the past, it's saying that today our relationship with Him is worse than it was yesterday, like in the past. Or we don't have this relationship anymore. Let's say, we've heard this a lot these days, if someone says they're my ex-husband or something like that, it means that they were their partner before, but not anymore. So if we say we had a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the past, it means at the moment we don't have this relationship with Him, which is terrible. It's as if we were on this trampoline, and we were jumping on it, then we got off. And now we're not jumping on it anymore. Why this is more dangerous than thinking of the future, like having a relationship in the future? Because with the relationship in the future, you can get to it eventually. Like you can, even if we procrastinate, yeah, you might have an epiphany one day, or a moment of realization, and then that thing's still there, the trampoline's still there, so you can go straight away to it. So it becomes it's a matter of time before you click sometimes, if you have that guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you were on the straight path already, you already had the guidance, then you chose to leave it, it's much harder to return. And if you don't return quickly enough, the springs of the trampoline can rust. And so the trampoline can actually break and not work anymore. If you remember from the Loving Allah lecture, Imam Ali, when he was talking about doubt, when we brought up the concept of doubt, we said that if you have doubt after you achieve the fitrah, it's only going to lead to bad. So after you have the guidance, if you have doubt, it's bad. But before you had the guidance, if you hadn't reached that level yet, doubt sometimes is good because it's doubt in the material things and stuff like that, and cements your deen. Same thing here. If we haven't gone to the trampoline yet, we still have a chance. But if we've gone off it, we're on it, and then we chose to get off it, that's much worse. So if we are off it, please let's make sure we get back on it straight away, quickly, before it's too late, and it does rust, and it doesn't work anymore no matter how much we try. Because there is a point where it's too late. So we have to be careful about how close we are to that point. Obviously, we don't know how long or what defines what's too late and stuff, because the mercy of Allah can extend that and whatnot. But we have to please be aware that we can't divert off the path of Islam and stay too long off the path of Islam, because it becomes much harder to get back on track. So now that we've talked about having a relationship in the past or in the future, let's say why it's important to have that relationship in the present. So that's if you are on the trampoline right now and you're jumping. What's the point of a trampoline? Let's ask this question. Why do we even go on a trampoline? Usually it's to jump, right? It's to see how high we can get. We can use the same analogy, metaphorically, with what we're trying to do here with Thikr. Thikr is... Why Thikr is so important and how it relates to this entire example is that Thikr is the act of looking at where we are in terms of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's like looking up in the sky when we're jumping and actually seeing how high we're getting. So it shows you, Thikr shows you what level you are at and where you can reach. It pretty much is what makes, it's like your way to make sure you're on the straight path. That is what Thikr is and how strong and important it is. It's what keeps us connected to the Sirat al-Mustaqim and keeps us in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to continuously have this Thikr. Now, before we move on to Dhikr itself, let's just quickly summarize why it's the other benefits that come with living in the present. In today's world, there are so many things, both in the past and the future, that are stressing us out, on our mind. The problem, if we do get caught in the past, that could be problematic. And what we mean by that is, for example, things like regret. Regret in small doses is really good because it means that you are being accountable of your actions. You've looked at the future of the akhirah and you realize that that action was wrong and that you are sincerely apologetic for doing that action, and it means you won't do it again. But the problem is, if you get trapped in regret, you can actually get chained down by it and you won't move forward after that. You sort of give up or get depressed. And that's bad because if you let your past shackle you, you won't be able to move forward. And so you lose that motivation that the fitrah gives you, and so you can't continue on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. So that's why it's really bad to live in the past only. As for the future, well, we said the shaitan makes it super confusing. There are so many options: stress, stress, stress. The problem with stress is that you can obviously stress, that's fine, you can, great. It's not going to help you. Because one is, stress comes from our inability to control our future. And just telling you, you can't control your future. That's not how it works. The only person that can control your future is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you just have to realize that you will never have this control. So stress isn't going to be helpful. Secondly, if you stress only, you're not doing anything to alleviate the stress, the thing that's making you stressed in the future. Let's say you're afraid of a sack that's coming up. Rather than stressing about it, because stressing doesn't help you do anything towards that sack. Start revising, do revision in the present, because doing stuff in the present is the only way that you can get a better outcome in the future. So actually use that time rather than just use that time to stress. And so I know it's easier said than done. It's super hard to do it. We always think, what if? I love it how when something's coming up and we're sort of nervous about it, we think of all the worst scenarios, and when it gets to the thing, if we have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not even that bad in the end. We've just made it bigger in our minds. Our mind has wandered off too far in that cone. So what we have to remember is always have this tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always remember that He is on the control. Make dua to Him. Always ask Him for the best outcome. That being said, it's not like that you can just do dua and okay, great, that means everything's going to go fine. Because that's not how it works. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't help you if you haven't worked for something as well. If you're not deserving of it too. So what we have to do is use the time in the present to work on ourselves and work to get to make sure that we are worthy of getting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help and achieving what we wanted to do in the future. Alright, so that was all about past and future. Now let's get back to dhikr itself. We need to train our mind to be able to control it and make it live in this present time. Because we see the importance of having a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the present, and that's the only time we can have dhikr, because it's the only time we'll be on the trampoline to look up. But unfortunately, shaitan doesn't want that to happen, and there are so many shaitans around us. Not only the iblis, but there are shayateen of ins, so people like corporations and stuff that are trying to make us stick to this material world. And so what we have to be careful of is letting them get the better of us. Because if you didn't know, we can only make 35,000 decisions a day. Research shows that that's our capacity of decisions. So what people in today's world are doing, and corporations with the globalized system, is they're trying to use up as many of those decisions as they can, so that when there are important decisions, we can't make them ourselves. And so they, guide us towards something, and therefore we become sort of like robots. Wherever they make us tell us to go, we go. Because they've bombarded us with so many decisions. And we can really see how, this marketing strategy, if we look at the recent apps that are coming out these days, there are so many apps these days that help us make decisions. Like they make decisions easier for us, which shows how hard and how difficult it is for us to make decisions these days. There's like things like Honey, Trivago, Choosy, Grammarly, all these things that help you make the best decisions. It shows you how bad we've reached a point where we can't make our own decisions because we just have so much to think about, so many options. It's what Shaitan does. He makes you think of so many different possibilities in the dunya that you can't look ahead. And to reinforce this concept and show you why it's a bit bad, let's look at we have to introduce a concept called simplicity to multiplicity. And it's pretty much when you have a concept and that concept stems out to multiple ideas. For example, if I tell you communication can be a lot of things. It can be verbal communication, written communication, or technology, like And if we look at technology, we can make it like phone, walkie-talkie, laptop, etc. And then from phone, we can take that even further. We can go to different platforms of social media: Viber, WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. What that shows you is from communication, we got so many things. And what that does is it uses so much of our thinking space and decision space. Think about all these, I'm gonna ask you this question. How many social media platforms do you have? These days, having one's not enough. The initial reason of social media was just for communication. But now, we don't see that one platform's enough. We need multiple. Because that's the world we're living in. It's so rapid and there's so many options. And that's where we can get lost and confused. Because we get caught up in this dunya. Another example is, I'm going to show you this. If I show you this picture, what are you going to think? Probably going to say cereal, right? What if I tell you I only see that as food? Because that's what it is. We eat food because we need to live on this world. That's why food was created. But now we have all these different types of food, which that's not bad. That's basic level multiplicity isn't too problematic. It's when we get to this that it gets hectic and ugly. I feel like Allah Sa'ad, the parents that go shopping every day and walking down those aisles, they've made so many options that we have to waste so many decisions on petty things like choosing which cereal to get, that it becomes actually a hindrance to us. Like parents probably thinking, oh, this person likes this cereal, but this has a high energy madrishinu. Like, it gets so complicated. And another thing that's a problematic with multiplicity is it manipulates how we take our choices. Rather than we want to buy food so we can eat, so we can have energy, so we can work towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we think, which food just tastes better? Which one do I like better? So we feed our desires. And so that's one of the other problems of multiplicity. It makes us more worldly driven, so more dunya driven, and that's a problem. So multiplicity helps not only us in terms of making our choices more worldly, but also corporations manipulating our choices. And to make you believe in what we're saying, rather than just making it sound like a conspiracy, I'm going to show you an aisle of all these different energy drinks. And I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Look at the picture, try naming as many of the brands you can, and I'm going to take it away, and I want you to pause the video and recall as many as you can. 3, 2, 1, go. Alright. How many could you recall? Well, if I wasn't mistaken, a lot of you did focus in that sort of region of the picture. Why that's the case is because, did you know that companies actually pay shops for shelving space? If it's more of like an adult or like teenager product, the second and the third shelves are the most expensive because it's around the height level of an adult. It's what we look at first when we're walking past. And that's things like the V and the Red Bull and the Gatorade. They've bought that section. If it's in a kid's aisle, like where it's like lollies and stuff, usually the lower shelves are worth more because that's where children are going to be, and they're going to like pick something up and go, "Mommy, can you buy this for me?" So what's interesting is they actually, just by where they put things, they're manipulating our choices. So you have to be careful. And by the way, have you noted how many different types of energy drinks there were? There are a lot. From iced tea, Fuse iced tea, Zero, Powerade, Gatorade, Lipton, Stamina, Mother, Monster, Rockstar, V, Red Bull, Coconut Water, Zico, Mount Franklin, Hydro, and different cordials. That's a lot. And for us to be having to choose from this is a waste of decision space. So how do we avoid all this complexity? And obviously the obvious answer is to simplify it. We need to learn how to simplify our decisions, because if we don't do that, we'll get lost and we'll waste decisions or thinking space that we need in our amal, that we need to use when we're praying so we can actually stay focused in praying, or we should use in dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's being wasted on petty things like which cereal to buy. I know this person, we shouldn't take everything, like all the lessons from him, but Steve Jobs, let's think about it. It's something he says is quite interesting and something we can learn from. He was once asked why he wears the same clothes every single day. And he responded, he was like, my decisions that I make every day on a corporate basis are so important that I don't have time to waste thinking space on which clothes I wear. So I wear the same thing every day so I don't have to waste space on that. That's interesting. It's a really nice lesson to learn from Steve Jobs, if it's the only lesson we can learn from Steve Jobs. That we should not let these petty things distract us. Let's not make them waste our thinking, like, oh, how I look like, etc., etc. Because that's all just going to distract us. We should learn to simplify and not be focused on those things. The issue that may come from this is that we may look different from everyone else, because everyone else is paying attention to how they look like. And if that makes you feel disheartened, remember that, are you doing it for everyone else? Because if you're doing things for everyone else, you're living in the dunya, in the fake future. Remember that you're doing what we're trying to do is everything should be done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so the real future. So it shouldn't matter what people think. But it is still hard, you're right. And that's why I guess we should all as a community come together and support each other. Because if a lot of people are doing it, it doesn't feel like that bad anymore. So we should all try living in this present together and supporting each other in terms of living in the present. And obviously all this can't be done without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's always remember that He is the only one that can help us in this path of living in the present. So now, before we get off track, how does this have anything related with dhikr? We've talked about multiplicity now and saying it wastes space in terms of, our brain space and stuff, and we don't have space for dhikr. But is there anything else that can help us with? Well, if you remember from the first lecture, we said that worship is into two segments, the general and the specific. Well, dhikr actually falls under the same category. It can be done in specific and general terms. So it's this general terms that we can focus on if we have this simplistic thinking rather than a multiplistic thinking. Because it means that when we look at something, we can, rather than see it's like all the different brands and whatnot, you think about it as food and therefore go, this hopefully will give me the energy that I can use to do worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so linking it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we only narrow down all this multiplicity nonsense and we look at things from a nice holistic view, only then can we actually attune our intention to make it always towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so remember Him all the time. That is dhikr. But then that we come to specific dhikr. What is that? Well, it does exist, and it's like saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, and all those different things. There's actually one dhikr that's super recommended for us to do. It's one of the specific dhikrs that we should do. It's called dhikr unity. It goes as follows. La ilaha illallah, subhanaka inni kuntu minal dhalimin. There is no God but you, O glorious God, I have been one of the oppressors. We're recommended actually to read this 400 times a day, and it's super important. And if we can do this, it's one of those mustahabat that can really make us jump high on that trampoline and look up. So it can kill two birds with one stone, I guess. But at the same time, it also really is recommended because it will help us connect with our Lord, inshallah. And by, remember, doing actions, we can gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. So that's why it's really important to do this dhikr. But the general dhikr can happen just by pondering about anything in the universe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the universe that was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and just saying subhanallah. And that's what we brought up when we mentioned in the first lecture, when we were describing iqra, when we explained what iqra meant. We said that the third meaning, which was what we were going to go for, included the first two meanings, but also added the fact that when we look at something, you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's really what pondering is. And we mentioned it in the Divine Intellectual Soul lecture. Pondering was one of the tools of the divine intellectual soul. And dhikr is what we can use before we can even actualize that soul. And so now let's just do a task. I know I've gone a bit over time, but let's do a bit of a task together where I'll show you some images and let's try and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these images. Or like something unique about the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. So I'm going to show you a zoomed up image of something and I want you just to try thinking of what that full thing is. So we'll start a bit basic. One of the sisters actually made this for us. What I recommend is you pause the video after each of the images, give yourself time to try thinking knowing what this is, and then look at the answer. So this is just a piece of crochet. What about this? This is the vessels inside of a leaf. What about this? Those are actually neurons in the brain. How they look like. What about this? Now we're getting a bit harder though. The first ones are quite basic. This is a bit more difficult. That's actually what a quark looks like. And quarks are what make up protons and neutrons inside an atom. So they're the building blocks of our building blocks. So it's whoa. And then this is more of a bigger scale. This is actually the universe. That's how it looks like if you zoom out. What do you see is common between all these things, like all these structures? Is there any structural similarity between them? Don't they sort of remind you of something that's centered in the middle and spreads out in an interconnected way? Like a spider web. In Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مثل الذين اتخذوا دون الله أولياء كمثل العنكبوت اتخذت بيتا وإن أوهن البيوت لبيت العنكبوت لو كانوا يعلمون. An example of those who take supporters other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a spider that made a house. The most fragile houses are those of spiders, if they knew. What the ayah is showing, and how we can relate this to our pondering that we just did, is it's showing that someone who takes something like a spider web as protection, or as a wali, or as a supporter, is doomed, because it's actually such a fragile thing. It may look strong, but it's fragile. So it's like us. If you remember in the first lecture when we talked about Surah Al-Alaq, we said that we were alaq, and that meant that we were dependent on something, and we said that we are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we try being dependent on anything else, we'll surely fail. Why will we fail? It's because everything's fragile like a spider web. Everything's weak like that, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing in the ayah. We can't take anything else as a supporter of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the only one that can support us in the best way. And so see what things can come from dhikr. We can learn such concepts and such insights. And if we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through everything, we'll be able to be alaq to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through things, which is really nice. Everything can teach us and be a qalam on our paper. So inshallah, this is the end of the lecture. So we'll be moving on to the video clip. We just want to put down the take-home message for today is how this world cannot support us. We need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why we should always remember Him, so that we can see Him as our goal and always strive towards Him. So that's today's lecture, dhikr. Now we move on to the video clip segment. Just a bit of a heads up about the video clip segment. It's from a movie called The Road to El Dorado. And that movie, it's about two guys who used to live in Spain, and when they were in Spain, they lived sort of like a thug sort of life. They robbed people, yeah. And so they wanted to escape that life, and so they find the city of El Dorado, the city of gold, and they first of all just wanted to go there so they can get money, and then they can go back to Spain and live the life they actually wanted. But then the more one of them had that goal and continued on that goal. But the other one started looking and saw the beauty of El Dorado. And so that's where he is right now. So this is when he sort of starts realizing where he is and how amazing the place he actually is. It is a song though, so we will be showing it. If you don't want to hear the lyrics, because songs are obviously not recommended to listen to, especially with beats and stuff, we just ask that you search up the lyrics on the internet. We will put a link to a video, which is just the lyrics, but it will have sound, so just mute the sound and just read the lyrics off that, because it has some really nice lyrics, and that's why we're sort of trying to show this video. If you don't mind seeing the video, it's like it's not too rocky, like it's not rocking music at all. So it's here and it's quite beautiful, especially if you link to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's actually a really nice story about an alim who was walking with a student one day, and there was a love song in one of the shops in the background, and so the sheikh, as he was walking past, starts crying. So the student's like, "What's wrong, sheikh? Why are you crying?" And so then he goes, "Oh, I just heard the love song, and it was so beautiful." And then the guy was like, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, sheikh, what are you doing? Music's haram." And he was like, "Yes, yeah." And he was like, "This is love between a girl and a boy." He's like, No, but I didn't think of it like that. I saw it as love between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And actually the words are quite beautiful. And if you remember, that's what we said. We said that we have our desires to give us a taster of what love is. So I'm not saying go listen to music. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying is sometimes we can find beauty in these things as well, especially if we apply it in the correct way. Because just that's the message I was going to bring up. I'll play the video now, and inshallah, if you don't, it's in the description section.
The more I learn, the more I see, the less the world impassions me. The hungry heart, the roving eye have come to rest, do not apply. Frantic chase, crazy ride, the thrill has gone, I step outside, I believe in anything, were it not for you, showing me by just existing, only this is true. I love you. Without question, I love you. Believe in anything, were it not for you, showing me by just existing, only this is true. Oh, I love you.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I forgot the line. So, in terms of what you got out of that video, I'll leave that a bit. You guys probably pause the video, think about the lyrics, but the things that you can really get out of it were some really nice concepts. The first one was there was a bit of lyrics that said that I used to believe in everything were it not for you. Obviously, in the context of the movie, they're talking about the city, and he was like, "Oh, I thought everything in the world made sense, but then I saw the city, and now I realized that I was wrong before." That really is applicable to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything, we're actually in this delusion world. We believe these days we believe everything in social media. Everything we hear, we go, "Oh wow." Like on the news and stuff, we don't realize that a lot of it could be fabricated and manipulated. Our choices are being manipulated. But if we have this Thikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this continuous remembrance, when we get that epiphany and that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll realize the actual truth. We won't believe in everything. We'll realize what is true, what is not, because we'll see the consequences of actions. And so we will be able to discern what's right and wrong. So that's something that was really nice. Another thing it said was, before I knew you and before I remembered you, the world used to impassion me. So it said the more I know, the more I learn about you, the less the world impassions me. That's so profound. That's what we were saying today. The more we get connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we remember Him and give everything to Him, the less we'll be focused on the dunya. The less the world will impassion us. The less we'll think about the future of the dunya, that fake future, and the more we'll look at the real future. And so that was something else. The last thing, with more in a narrative sort of perspective, was the dominoes. At the beginning, they were like that dark color, that blue. And that moment, it signified how someone who before did not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with one act of, when he starts seeing and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, suddenly that change will happen. Like a domino effect. Just that one act of remembrance will lead to multiple things that will get us closer and closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It'll like kickstart that journey and that motivation to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stay on the Sirat al-Mustaqim and eventually actualize our souls and achieve our purpose in this world. That was something else that was really nice. So yeah, I know it was a song, but there are sometimes we see these gems in there. Like especially that line, the world impassions me. Like you wouldn't think that people that aren't Muslim would have such concepts. But yeah, there are things like that out there. So we really have to take everything and learn from everything. Let it inscribe on us as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That is it for today. Inshallah, the link for the quiz will be in the description section. And thank you for listening.